When I was a kid, this guy was Superman, and for decades to come, he represented the true ideals of what it meant to be a hero. But over the decades, things have changed. We've changed. Superman has changed. The Superman that this generation knows is way darker, jaded, angry, even violent, and we've seen that in different parodies and versions of the Superman archetype, like The Boys or Brightburn. But have you ever stopped to think how these television and film Supermen actually reflect how we are becoming darker as a culture, how we are killing the idea of the Superman? It's not truth, justice, and the American way. It's lies, injustice, and whatever the opposite of America is. Maybe healthcare, on a very special episode of Real School. There's this discipline called cleodynamics, which is basically, in layman's term, the science of history, how we can use historical patterns to possibly predict what's going to happen in the world. Well, what does this have to do with Superman? I do want to preface that I mean almost every version of Superman in recent television and film has taken some really dark turns, whether it's a parody or not. Superman has seemingly lost his way. You may be thinking that the most recent version we've had on the big screen with Henry Cavill was just a business decision. Maybe it was Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy that influenced this new Superman character. But believe it or not, we could have actually predicted the darker version of Superman based on some of the stuff that cleodynamics shows us. I know it seems minute, but trust me, there's a pattern. It seems that almost on the dot, every 50 years, cyclical, political, and socioeconomic factors lead America to a very dark and angry place. Hence why we had a Great Depression almost 100 years ago. In the 1970s, America had what was known as the Great Inflation. The stock market was a mess, unemployment reached double digits, and economic growth wasn't all that good. Now, if you are a cinematic history buff, you probably realize that Christopher Reeve's Superman came out in the late 1970s, so there doesn't seem to be a correlation, but that was the late 1970s. Things were getting better. And in the 1980s, when he had 3 other Superman films, things were significantly better. Fast forward to 2010, the Great Recession had ended, and yet things were still not that great. Foreclosures were happening all across the country, and unemployment was very high. And in 2013, we got Man of Steel. And you gotta remember that this isn't just one person's singular vision. Over 6 years, there were 3 different Superman films: Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and Justice League. And yet they all represent those dark ideals that don't really seem conducive to the original Superman. Superman in those films was arguably the most violent we've ever seen. I mean, let's not forget the visceral ending to his battle with Zod. We've never seen that kind of intensity when it comes to the Man of Steel on the big screen. There's no denying that we in Western culture are becoming more violent right now. And you know what? It doesn't just relate to the real world. It also relates to pop culture and media consumption. The deal is truth, justice, and the American way has changed dramatically. Let's address justice first, and it doesn't just have to do with the supersonic neck snap that he did in Man of Steel. It's the way Superman continued to carry himself in the next film. Superman in Batman v Superman rather hypocritically didn't like the way that Batman dealt with criminals in his own way. Vigilantism wasn't his sense of justice. Ironically, both characters somewhat felt that the other one was carrying out justice in their own way, and that's what they were worried about, their own self-righteousness and their own sense of justice. Most of the story in Batman v Superman was loosely adapted by Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, but there's one thing that the film forgot. In Dark Knight Returns, Superman is a political puppet. He serves the president. He serves the American way. In the film, he only serves himself. We see that self-important sense of justice in 2 of the dark Supermen we've seen recently, Brandon in Brightburn and the Homelander in The Boys. Both twisted Supermen carry out their own sense of justice. Brandon breaks the hand of Caitlin, a classmate who makes fun of him and then later kills Caitlin's mother when he feels that she deserves punishment. Homelander kills indiscriminately. He kills not only criminals but innocent people as well to serve his own purposes. And you know what? Maybe that's the reason that we get these characters, that they're supposed to be twisted versions of the Superman archetype. But it also has to do with the fact that we, as a society, are starting to believe that this is what justice is. If you think that's a stretch, then think about this. This generation, post 9/11, has a lot of violence in their heart, a lot of frustration because justice is not necessarily being carried out the way it should. So let's talk about truth. I mean, it's no coincidence that Clark in Batman v Superman is misfed information in order to manipulate him. And in fact, both he and Batman don't necessarily see any middle ground until the third act of the film. They both feel that they're absolutely right, that their truth is the only truth. Does that sound like anything happening these days? Lex Luthor, or whatever that was in Batman v Superman, purposely manipulates Superman in order to do his bidding, but look at how he fell for that. Information was presented to Superman right away, and he lost his journalistic perspective. He didn't delve into it or investigate further. He immediately acted upon that truth. Homelander in The Boys is the absolute worst aspects when it comes to the American ideal of truth these days. His fabricated background covers not only who he was, but who he truly is. Everything that is fed to the public, that truth, is not true at all. The Boys brilliantly and terrifyingly shows us that we don't really care what the truth is. We just care what social media feeds us. BOYS and BRIGHTBURN doesn't even get the benefit of the truth. His parents hide his history and his backstory from him to their own detriment, but it does address a larger point. Think about how all three of these characters, regardless if they're trying to be villain, anti-hero, or superhero, all turn out violent. Clark and Brandon are raised by loving parents. Homelander is not. Homelander and Brandon kill their parental figures. Luckily, Clark does not, but Clark does harbor some resentment when it comes to his father figures for abandoning him. The juxtaposition of all three of these characters, regardless of their inherent nature or regardless of how they were brought up, does lead to some interesting conclusions. 1. The youth of today, above the age of 18, don't really trust their parents because they believe that baby boomers, perhaps even Gen Xers, are the ones that caused all these problems in the first place. And the other conclusion is a perfect segue into the American way, because all three of these characters were raised in small town, rural America, and you have to admit that rural America has changed significantly. All three of these characters are a metaphor for how middle America has all this pent-up frustration. You might be thinking, Man of Steel's not frustrated. We've addressed that, but we can also address the fact that he destroys his hometown. That metaphor is continued when he's unleashed for the very first time. And think about the fact that he wasn't even that violent until he left for Metropolis and got a wider perspective on the world. Homelander takes that to the next degree, and not just because of the level of violence that he portrays, but the fact that he portrays how the American way has lost its way. He's all about image, social status, greed, power, money. He's an opportunistic, cutthroat sociopath who doesn't care who gets hurt as long as he gets what he wants. If those twisted ideals don't represent American history right now, I don't know what does. You might say to yourself, that's not my America, and I hope you're right, but you do have to ask, does America still believe in truth, justice, and the American way? Because if something like Superman can be twisted from the pure state that it once was, I'm pretty sure anything can. Hey Real students, thanks for watching. If you want to subscribe to Real School, click that round Real School logo right beside me. Also click that damn notification bell so you're aware of all of Real School's new content. You can follow me on Twitter, and of course, if you get anything out of Real School, you can always give a little back. Just click the link in the description below or the button down there, and you can become part of my Patreon team.